Greetings, my name is Kerry and welcome back to my channel. It's time for another recent reads video. It's been a little while since I've filmed one of these for various reasons, so I've got quite a few books to talk about today. I think I've got maybe 13 books to talk about today. Some of them I'll talk about in more detail than others. A few of them I've got reviews coming relatively soon for, so I will probably talk a little bit less about them, although I'll give you an overview of my thoughts now. And there were a couple that I was reading for uni, so I will probably not say as much about them either. But without further ado, let's just get into the books because I've got quite a few to get through. I will also say that a lot of these books were either from the library or they were ebooks, or I was visiting my parents at one point during the time that I was reading these books, so any that I did have physically I may have taken home with me. I do have a couple here to hold up to show you, but won't be most of them, so I'll put pictures up for the other ones. So without further ado, let's get into the books. So the first book I'm going to be talking about today was Don't Touch My Hair by Emma Dabiri. This was my second time reading a book by her. It's non-fiction. She's a social historian, and I read another one of hers called What White People Can Do Next earlier this year, which was her book that has come out this year, and Don't Touch My Hair came out a couple of years ago, and it looks at the history of hairstyling from an African perspective, culturally, historically, and how that fits in with a very European-centric beauty standard that exists in a lot of the world today. And it was really, really fascinating because I didn't know that much about hair in general, I guess, but specifically about African communities and like the type of care that people from African descent need to take over their hair. Emma Dabiri wove in the history with her own story of her relationship to her hair. She's Irish Nigerian, and so she had a complicated relationship growing up in Ireland, being of Nigerian descent, having very different hair to everyone else around her, and how kind of she learnt to cope with that and manage it, and then eventually learned to love her hair and care for it effectively. And she mixed that in with a lot of social history about hairstyling and what it means in African culture, in different African cultures as well. So it was really, really fascinating, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book that I finished was Yesterday by Juan Amar. This took me quite a long time to get through for a very short book because it is surrealist. It's magical realism, but it's very surreal, and I just was not in the mood for that. I probably should have put it to one side and picked it up again later, but it was one of my Cluedo picks, so I did feel the need to get through it. It was quite funny. It's very weird. It's from Perrine Press, who are a small independent publisher that I really love. They find lesser known works and translate them into English, and it's often the first time these authors will have been translated into English. The author Juan Amar is actually a pen name, is Chilean, and he was a really well-known writer in Chile in the, I think it was in the 30s, he was at his most prominent. He's never been translated into English before and isn't well known outside of Chile. So it was really great to have this book translated for the first time, and I have a subscription to Perrine, so I get everything they publish, and I'm really glad to have read it, and it's probably one I will go back to when I'm more in the mood for surreal literature. So I did give it 4 stars because I thought it was really well written, and credit to the translator as well. And it was fun to read something very different from what I would usually read. I think I'm going to lend it to my dad to see what he thinks of it. He reads quite a lot of Spanish literature, mainly because he's trying to learn Spanish, so he tries to read things in Spanish, but I might see what he thinks of it. Yeah, so that was that one. I think I said I gave it 4 stars. The next book that I finished was called Faith and Fiction by Anita Gandolfo. This was one I was reading for research because I'm looking at American evangelical romance fiction. So I'm trying to understand kind of the culture that these books are coming out of, and Faith and Fiction is looking at the relationship between faith and fiction, between religion and literature in American society. It was written about 15 years ago, but there's not been a lot written about this topic. So it's been really actually hard to find books as secondary sources for my research. I need to look a little bit more into whether more journal articles have been written, but this did give me some other resources I can go and check out to look particularly more at the cultural side or the literary side. There's not been a lot that looks at both, and I'm not sure if much has been written more recently, so I need to look into that a little bit more. But yeah, this was really helpful for me for my research, and it actually added quite a few things to my non-research TBR as well, because some of the books that she talks about sounded really good. Books not necessarily from the evangelical publishing camp, but kind of more general literary fiction that looks at religious themes. So yeah, I quite enjoyed that one, and I gave it 4 stars, and will be like dipping in and out of it a lot over the next couple of years as I do my research. The next book that I finished was Ninefox Gambit by Yoonha Lee. This is science fiction, quite weird science fiction, and I really loved it. So it follows Cheris, who is a captain in the fleet. Forgotten all the names of the different societies in the book. It's quite a complicated society that runs on very regimented calendrical systems that enable like the army to produce manifestations that help them to fight. Anything that deviates from the calendar is considered heretical. Cheris is picked for a challenging mission to combat a fortress set on a planet that has become heretical, and to do so she requests the help of a disgraced former general called Shuos Jadao, but he's kind of dead. He's been kept in kind of this, I mean, it's really difficult to explain. Anyway, so he kind of becomes a voice in her head. I don't know how to explain it. It sounds super weird. It is really good. I really loved this book. Had no hesitation giving it 5 stars, but it is weird sci-fi. So if you're new to sci-fi, maybe wait a bit and read some more straightforward sci-fi before attempting this, because it is very confusing. But I really loved it. I've got the next book out from the library already, and I'm going to be getting to it soon because I'm really excited to carry on the series. I have been warned that the next book follows different characters, which is fine, but I'm just so intrigued to see more of this world that Yoonha Lee has created, because it is so fascinating. And yeah, really can't say enough good things about that book. If you read a lot of sci-fi and you like sci-fi, then you will probably like this. Also, it really reminded me stylistically and in terms of confusingness of the Ancillary Justice series by Anne Leckie. So if you've read that series and enjoyed that, I think you'll enjoy this one. If you've read Ninefox Gambit, the Machineries of Empire series, and enjoyed it, and you haven't read Ancillary Justice and those books, you should read those next. So yeah, no hesitation giving that 5 stars. Really looking forward to continuing that series, and can't say enough good things about it, really. And that was a Space Sirens book club pick, so I'm really glad it was nominated, because I probably wouldn't have picked it up otherwise. So very pleased to have read that. The next book that I finished was Seasons Between Us, which was an anthology of primarily short stories, but also there was a little bit of poetry in there, and it was edited by Susan Forrest and Lukas K. Law. I had this as an e-arc from NetGalley. It came out in the summer. I didn't quite get to it in time to review it before it came out, but I'm very glad to have finished it now. And I will be filming a full review of it soon, probably paired up with another anthology that I'm currently reading at the moment, because they are on similar themes. I really enjoyed this. This was actually one of the first things I was approved for on NetGalley, so I feel slightly bad that I didn't manage to read it before it came out, but it was so worth reading it. It was so worth the wait. I had no hesitation giving it 5 stars, which is really rare for an anthology. Usually there's a couple of stories that I wouldn't enjoy as much. And while that was still kind of true, I really enjoyed every single story in this anthology. There were no contributions that let it down for me. Every contribution was really enjoyable. It was all speculative fiction, so science fiction or fantasy, and all around the themes of relationships and seasons and things that separate people. The subtitle is Tales of Identities and Memories, and that was really, the theme that came through it. Lots of really talented authors that I will be looking out for more that they've written. It's one of a series from the publisher. They seem to specialise in this kind of anthology, so I will definitely be looking out for more books from this publisher, more collections, because I really enjoyed it. And yeah, we'll have a full review coming for it soon. So I gave that one 5 stars as well. The next book that I finished was called Malto by Kuda D. Gutu. This was another review book. This one I received from Love Book Tours, and I contributed to the book tour for this book. So this one came out in the late summer as well, but the tour was towards the end of October, and so I posted a full review on Instagram. I've also filmed a review which may or may not have been published before this. So this is African-inspired fantasy, and when I say African-inspired, many of the tribes featured and many of the characters were inspired by real-life tribes and real-life people. So at the end of the book, which I thought was really lovely in the author's note, he includes a little list of the different characters and the different tribes that were reflected in the characters and tribes that he included within the book. The basic premise of this is that the pharaoh of the main tribe from the Southern Kingdom has died, and his wife is going to be regent because their daughter is too young to rule. So she is acting pharaoh, and the other tribal leaders aren't convinced that she has what it takes to lead them. The other main character, Malto, who's the title character, is the son of one of the other tribal leaders. He's very headstrong and very impulsive, and he has to learn how to control himself, how to rein in his impulses and reflect and think on things. So he is put under the training of someone in the previous pharaoh's court. So it's kind of told over multiple timelines, and the stories all weave together so that he can learn how to be a great tactician to serve both his tribe and the Southern Kingdom. In the meantime, the Northern Kingdom is preparing for war. They're preparing to attack the Southern Kingdom because they believe that the Southern Kingdom have stolen their heritage. The two kingdoms are rooted in the same family as two brothers that split off and were at war, and that led to the two separate kingdoms. There's quite a complex backstory. It's told, as I mentioned, over multiple timelines. What I would say about it was that sometimes that got a bit confusing. It wasn't always clear what part of the chronology we were in. So that was one of the reasons I only gave this book 3 stars, because I thought it needed just a little bit more editing to tighten that up and make it clearer where we were in the story to make it less confusing. There were also quite a few typographical errors or misused words that, again, a slightly more thorough edit would have picked up. But other than that, I really enjoyed it. The characterization was really good. The characters were strong. The plot was really interesting. The magic system was really clever and I quite liked it, and the pace was generally pretty good, and I did just want to keep reading and learn what happened, and I'm really intrigued to pick up the next book in the series, which I assume is coming out probably sometime next year. It was Kuda di Gutu's first novel, so he's released a book of poetry before this, so I think he only can improve as an author, and I'm sure the next book will be even better. So I gave that one 3 stars, and I really did enjoy it very much. There were just a few little things that if they'd been slightly tweaked, then it would have been a slightly better reading experience for me, and that would have given it the extra star. The next book that I finished was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is the first book in a YA contemporary mystery trilogy that a lot of my friends have been raving about, and so I'm very glad that I finally got around to reading the first one. It was actually lent to me by a friend a little while back, and she promised me that I'd love it, and I did. I had no hesitations giving this 5 stars. So this follows Pip, who is in her final year of high school. It's set in the UK. Well, the UK edition is set in the UK. I think for the American edition, they actually did transplant the story into an American setting because it's a small town scenario. I think it's about 5 years before the story takes place. A girl from Pip's school who was a bit older than her went missing, and everyone assumed that her boyfriend was responsible for her disappearance. Everyone thinks she's probably dead. She's never been heard of since. And then a few days after she disappeared, her boyfriend apparently killed himself. But Pip has never believed the narrative from the media. So for her final year of school, she has to do an independent project, and she chooses this story and starts digging into what actually happened and uncovering a lot of secrets that a lot of people didn't want uncovered. I thought this was really brilliantly written. I read it very quickly. I gave it 5 stars. I really, really loved it. Pip was a brilliant character. Reminded me a lot of me at that age for a lot of reasons. And I'm really keen to carry on this series. I've borrowed the next book from my friend already, so I can carry on that series. Yeah, and there was a lot that I really, really enjoyed about it. So happily gave it 5 stars and looking forward to carrying on with that series. The next book that I finished was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I gave it 3 stars in the end. So this is a retelling of part of the story of the Iliad from the point of view of Patroclus, who was an associate of Achilles. In this book, he is his lover. I really enjoyed a lot of it. I enjoyed Patroclus as a character. It's told from his perspective. But yeah, just towards the end, I just got a bit fed up with what I termed to my friend as the willy wanging of some of the male characters who just not get over themselves and letting a lot of people be killed because of their pride and obstinacy. But yeah, there was a lot to enjoy about it. I quite like Madeline Miller's writing style most of the time. I read Circe a few years ago and I enjoyed it slightly more. I think her writing had developed a little bit between the 2 books. Yeah, and I just enjoyed the story a bit more. More from a woman's perspective and less willy-wanging going on. I picked this up because of the association to my research. That was one reason. I mean, the other reason was that I'd enjoyed Circe and heard good things about the Song of Achilles. But my research is looking at evangelical romance fiction set in ancient Israel, retellings of Bible stories. So I've been trying to find other books from outside of evangelical publishing that are set in the same kind of era. And it's been really hard to find anything, particularly anything that would fit into the romance genre. So this had a romance element, but it was more literary / historical fiction than like a genre romance. So I'm still looking for more things to give me some more comparisons for my research. But yeah, it was worth reading. I enjoyed it to an extent. I would read more from Madeline Miller, but I've not got a lot more to say about it than that really. So I gave that one 3 stars. The next book that I finished was The Reckless Afterlife of Harriet Stoker by Lauren James. I love Lauren James as an author, but this book didn't quite hit the mark for me as much as her other books, so I only gave this one 3 stars. So the story follows Harriet, who is a photography student at, I think it's at Warwick University. It doesn't really matter. Anyways, she decides to do a photography project at an abandoned halls of residence where about 20 years earlier a lot of students died mysteriously in their sleep and no one ever really got to the bottom of why. So she's gone to this abandoned building to take some photos and she dies essentially. She falls to her death and then meets the ghosts of a lot of these students and has to try and find how she fits into this society. But she's had quite a troubled background herself, doesn't really know how to make friends or really be nice to people. Lauren James said at the time the book came out that she'd wanted to try writing a character who was not inherently likeable, which is fine. I mean, I prefer character-driven books, so I think I always knew I was going to slightly struggle with this because I like characters that have at least some redeeming features. And I felt there was a bit of tension in Harriet's character because we get glimpses of her troubled background and why that might feed into how she acts. I was kind of torn between not wanting to like her but wanting to have sympathy for her, and I think that was to do with the way it was written as well. So this was my least favourite of Lauren James books that I've read before, and I would say if you haven't read any Lauren James before, I probably wouldn't recommend you start with this one unless you're really into kind of the more horror side of speculative fiction. It's not really a horror book, it's a spooky book. I suppose I'd term it more as urban fantasy, but yeah, just for me it didn't quite hit the same way. I'd recommend for speculative fiction, starting with The Next Together, or for more science fiction, start with The Loneliest Girl in the Universe. They're the ones that I've enjoyed the most out of her books. But I still love her as an author. I still want to read everything that she's written. It's just sometimes even your favourite authors write things that you don't love. So I gave that one 3 stars. The next book that I finished, I actually also gave 3 stars. This one I can hold up for you. This is Before the Storm by Diane Chamberlain. This was a reread for me. I've got the sequel to it to read soon, which is Secrets She Left Behind. This was one of my Cluedo picks. The sequel is on both my oldest books on my TBR and series I want to finish list, so I had to reread this one because I couldn't remember quite enough about it to be able to read the sequel. This follows a family called the Lockwood Family. The mum, Laurel, is a single parent because her husband died a number of years before in slightly mysterious circumstances. She has 2 children, Maggie and Andy. Andy has fetal alcohol spectrum disorder because Lauren was an alcoholic when she was pregnant with him. A lot of the backstory of this book is told across the 2 timelines, so you get Lauren's backstory in amongst the present day story, and it covers a lot of these issues. The present day story begins with a fire at a local church where the youth group are having a lock-in, and Andy is present at this lock-in, and he manages to find a safe way out of the building and leaves a lot of the other young people to safety, so he's considered a hero. But then when they begin to investigate the fire and find out that it was set deliberately, suspicion starts to fall on Andy, and Laurel is doing everything she can to try and prove his innocence, and that has repercussions for her family. In the meantime, a lot of secrets from her past and her late husband's past and his brother's past are all starting to come to light, and that also has an impact on the family. This was a really fast-paced book to read. I read it quite quickly. I think I enjoyed it more the first time I read it. It was quite a few years ago when I was reading a lot of this type of book, and I think I've kind of slightly grown out of my enjoyment for this style of book, but I still quite enjoyed it. I still gave it 3 stars. I'm gonna read the other one. I probably won't keep them. I do have a couple of other Diane Chamberlain books in storage as well. When I come to unpack those, I'll decide at that point whether I want to read any more from her or whether just this one series will satisfy me. It wasn't unenjoyable, I just don't really love this type of book anymore, I guess. Yeah, so I gave it 3 stars. The next book that I finished was the 3rd volume of Les Miserables, which is called Marius, and I finished the French edition of this. I've mentioned a few times that I'm working through the book in French and English. My French edition is in 5 individual volumes, whereas the English edition is the complete work in 1 volume. So I finished the 3rd volume in French and in English, but it only counts as anyway. Yeah, I mean, it was a good continuation of the story. It introduces a new character, Marius, and so we kind of lose a little bit of sight of the characters that have taken us through the first 2 volumes, but I enjoyed it. It took me a bit longer to get through, and I kind of was going quite slowly through the first bit. I've been struggling a lot with fatigue recently, and so trying to read in French has been a bit more difficult than maybe it was over the summer when I had a bit more free time. But I still enjoyed it. I still gave this volume 4 stars. The whole book will probably be a 4-star book for me. I have read Les Miserables before, but a really, really long time ago. So I'm really enjoying rereading it and practicing my French by reading the French edition as well. The next book I finished, I'm not going to talk very much about. It was called Abigail by Jill Eileen Smith. This is the 2nd book in the Wives of King David series. This is one of the books that my research will be focusing on, retelling the story of King David from the Bible from the perspective of his wives. So I have a number of similar books to this one. This one was okay. It was a bit better than the first one in the series. It was better written, particularly. Still a lot of problematic stuff that gives me lots to unpack for my research. But yeah, Jill Eileen Smith's writing definitely improved between the first 2 books, and I'm reading the 3rd one now. Again, it's better written. Yeah, so I'm gonna have loads to say about that, but I don't really have very much more to say to you now because I need to reflect on it a bit more. Yeah, so that one I gave 3 stars. And then the final book I'm going to be talking about today is called The Mountain Sing by Nguyen Phan Quay Mai. It's set in Vietnam over a number of decades in the 20th century, following one family's history and how the different kind of invasions and wars within that country and revolutions affect one family's story. It's told across different generations. The central character, she's referred to as Guava, that's her nickname that her grandmother calls her. Part of it is told from her perspective during, I think that I've taken the book back to the library, so I'm a little bit hazy on the details. Her part of the story set in the 70s during the Vietnam War, and then it tracks back and has her grandmother telling her story from the 30s onwards, I think it was, and kind of giving Guava the history, the background to her family. It was really, really beautiful, really beautifully written, told me a lot that I didn't know. I didn't really know anything about Vietnam other than that there was a significant American military action there in the 70s, and most of what I knew about that was from seeing the musical Miss Saigon when I was a teenager. Yeah, didn't really know anything about it, so it was really, really good to read this and to learn more about their history. And as I said, so beautifully written, really impactful book that I really loved. This was recommended to me by Stephanie from Miss Richards Reads. She really loved it, so much that I think she finished it and started reading it again right away. So I knew it must be good. So I'm really grateful to her for recommending it. Lots of difficult and dark topics covered in this book, as in some of the other ones. So I will say now, I've not been giving content warnings, but I will be linking in the description to the Book Trigger Warnings website for each of these books that have a page on their website, so that you can check out if these books are safe for you to read, because several of them have some quite difficult topics that they cover, some content that might be upsetting for some people. This one in particular had quite a lot of that sort of thing, so you have to be in the right place to read it, but I just thought it was really beautiful and would really recommend it to everyone, particularly if you don't know a lot about Vietnamese recent history. Really good way of educating yourself about that through the lens of one fictional family. Wow, that is all the books I've got to talk about today. This took quite a while, so I'm going to try not to leave it so long between filming these next time, but never mind. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, or let me know some of what you've been reading recently and anything you've particularly enjoyed. Or if you just want to let me know that you've been here, you can leave me a mountain emoji. Are there mountain emojis? For the mountains thing, because I really rate that book and would really recommend it. You can also like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you haven't already. You can also follow me on my social media. All that information is listed for you in the description box below. But that's it for today. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!